Weapons. Ever since mankind's early days, we've been bashing rocks off each other for more berries around the campfire. Weapons are cool, but fictional weapons are even cooler. Project Moon is a name that you are most familiar with if you clicked on this video, but if not, I'll keep this brief. Project Moon are a Korean game company with 3 games and 3 web novels under their belt. Most of them don't share main characters, but what they all share is the same world of City. A massive, continent-sized corporate hellhole that houses the entirety of humanity in its walls. In City, being a mercenary, also known as a fixer, is as common as being a retail worker. People die in City. A lot. And since it's so massive, it houses hundreds of thousands of fixer offices who all specialise in specific weaponry. And that's what I want to talk about today. There is a ton of cool designs that I think get overlooked, so today I'm going to recognise them. Spoilers ahead for the entire franchise, and I highly recommend you play them all yourself. But don't start with Limbus Company. Yes, it's free, but it's the 3rd game in the franchise and the 6th chronological piece of content. This is the chronological order to experience them in and have fun. And hey, before you go play them, why don't you subscribe? I make primarily Project Moon videos, so if you'd like to see more of that, stick around. It means a lot, really. Self-promotion aside, let's just get started and have a look at Project Moon's unique weapons. Starting with good old LobCorp, the seeds that grew the field and the butter to Project Moon's bread. I should mention now that I won't be talking about every single weapon in the series because, well, that would take a millennia. But instead I'll be mentioning my personal favourites and standouts, starting with the very first Abno weapon you get in the game, Penitence. Penitence, not Penitence, is his Aeon weapon, meaning that in the canon it's not very powerful, at all. But what it lacks in raw strength, it makes up for in looks. This thing is probably the most metal weapon I've ever seen in my life. It's literally an iron cross shoved through his skull wearing Jesus' torn crown and stuck on the end of a staff to make a holy mace. A mace that admittedly doesn't do much damage, but it's holy. I mean, what should we classify this as? Is it a mace? I only hesitate to call it an axe because it doesn't look very sharp. It looks like a blunted end, but then again, characters like Guts' blades don't look sharp either, and well, look what they can do. Penitence is very much form over factor, and for that I have to dock it some brownie points, but then give him right back for matching the armor's colour scheme, which is a rarer trend than you'd think in this series. Staying on Zane's, Welchier's gets a mention for being a soda gun. It's like a shitty plastic toy you'd get in a Happy Meal, but it does red damage, so we know it hurts. Honestly, if you just took away the writing on it, this would make a really cool weapon skin and some shooter that would cost you like $25. But it also gets brownie points for matching the armor, which itself looks like the shrimps. Also, it's like a scratch and sniff sticker because in-game, the gun is described as smelling like grapes. I don't think you could realistically kill anything with this. I mean, it does 1-2 damage, but where there's a will, there's a way. But if a gun isn't your thing, then check out Limbus' Welchier's Ego, where they give Honglu a massive fishing net full of what I assume to be shrimps, which he clobbers into enemies. And Ryoshu gets 2 cans of grape soda, which are then shaken before exploding so forcefully they can kill a man, or multiple. Soda is deadly, kids, drink water instead. But they live in the water too. But don't listen to me for life advice, listen to your granny. She'll give you a gun. Who the fuck at Project Moon decided that giving the granny a gun as her one and only weapon was a good idea? Because I love you. There is no extra colourful linings like Welchier's or album cover looking designs like Penitence. This is just a revolver that deals white damage, meaning that when you get shot by this thing, it hurts you mentally. Granny came strapped to the facility and she isn't taking any chances, goddamn. If old people came ready for a fight, then the youngins came to warmonger because Scorched Girl gives you a cannon. You get a massive looking cannon with a match struck through it to blast balls of fire at enemies who get in your way. Now, why is the little girl giving you this? I don't know, but I'm not complaining. Looks wise, I think the weapon has a very striking design, but it does hurt my brain to figure out where the trigger is. I think it would look much better if the match wasn't driven through the center, but oh well. She is also a Limbus, but there she just gives the sword to Ryoshu and a slay! More guns! You gotta come to work strapped and slapped because your ball gives you the quintessential cool guy action hero loadout, which is literally just a Glock. An actual Glock that does red damage. And also a leather jacket. Spider Bud gives you a mace called Red Eyes and it's covered with red eyes. This is some really cool Junji Ito style body horror worked into a weapon, and as far as I know the mace is alive, so you're just whacking creatures with an immobilized head. The horror of this fits well into LobCorp's aesthetic and tone, being a game that I find to excel in dark and subtle humour. Just look at this thing though. It won't be the only alive weapon we look at today, but it's got one hell of a sickening design. Harmony is Singing Machine's ego weapon, and I mean what a weapon it is. Harmony is also apparently a cannon. This is a cannon. This looks like a masochistic deli slicer. I gotta say, compared to Fourth Match Flame, I really love that Harmony is literally just a portable singing machine. It also plays music too, so that's neat. Only in LobCorp can an inanimate object give you a bazooka to wreck shit up with. Thank you, Singing Machine. Very cool. Also, the description of it sounds super metal. Never stop performing until the body crumbles to dust. Not even the other music abdos have something that threatening. I'm looking at you, Mr. Silent Orchestra. Woodsman, not that Woodsman, this Woodsman is one of the best designed abdos in the franchise, no question. And I'd be amiss if I didn't mention his literal axe of an ego weapon called logging. Yeah, it is just an axe, but the mechanical parts on the back are subtle, yet still add a ton to the design. I just wanted to mention Woodsman somewhere in the video, and it fits him a lot better than the Nuggets because it's like twice their size. Nameless, despite being horrific himself, has a wacky ass weapon. It's literally a handgun that looks like Nameless's mouth, but if you ask me, it kinda looks more like a Terraria weapon, like Aya Cthulhu or some shit. I have no idea what was going through the dev's mind when they made this, but I'm glad they did. It's kind of horrifying. Imagine being some fixer ordeal just showing up at a facility expecting to kill a bunch of office workers, and then someone just blasts you with the BB gun and you die of mental anguish. Actually, do you know what? Being blasted with the BB gun and dying is actually really metal when I lay it out like that. Reddit has a grinder. This BB gun. Reddit has a grinder. This won't be the last we see of chainsaws anyways. His ego weapon isn't what I want to talk about though, because Angela's realization on Yesod's floor is where it's at. Doc Ock got himself a big titty robot wife, and this is such a clean design. I can assure you, this won't be the last time we see Angela's egos, but it is a daylight robbery that we haven't seen her unique ego expanded upon. This design is much more true to Reddit's original 4-knife leg look compared to fucking chainsaws. Redulta's weapon is literally just a meat club. What a nice gift. Thank you, Redulta. I appreciate these creature-made horrors, unfortunately within my comprehension. Unfortunately, the meat club didn't reappear in Limbus, but we did get a meat sack. Can I say that on YouTube? Otis's meat sack. Heathcliff's meat sack. Laetitia is under my protection, but she can protect herself too, because this wholesome bundle of joy comes packing. Granny must have gave Leigh her inheritance early, because this rifle is so fucking cool. The pink and white with black accents is beyond clean, and I'm a hater of golden guns normally, but the gold metal finish just fits here so perfectly. It plays off the black and pink to a T. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not a gun nerd. The thumbnail to this video isn't a weapon inspection screenshot from Battlefield or whatever, so I don't know what type of gun this is. I want to say it's a musket because it definitely isn't a lever action, and I also don't see a bolt on it, so I would assume it's a black powder rifle. Doesn't matter though, this is just another reason why Laetitia is the GOAT. Good God, it's so nice looking. The weapon description calls it a quote-unquote crude design, which, I mean, I couldn't disagree more with. Slickest looking weapon in the franchise right here. This is why I own a musket for corp defense. Staying on the topic of guns yet again, Funeral of Dead Butterflies gives Laetitia some serious competition with his dual pistols. They have butterfly decals on them to represent the big man himself, and they do what you'd expect a pistol to do. There really isn't much to say about these other than, I mean, they look clean as all hell. The description for this weapon mentions how one handgun symbolizes grief of the dead. I would assume this is the black one, and the other symbolizes early lament for the living, and I would assume this is the white one because of its brighter, more alive tone. Now, you knew this was coming, so I might as well bite the bullet, so to speak. Funeral is the most powerful ego in Ruin, but it doesn't change much of its design, if at all. Angela definitely rocks the outfit better than anyone else because the black complements her blue hair so well, and this little butterfly on her hair is adorable. You knew this was coming. Durfry Shoots gives you an ego weapon called the Magic Bullet. A literal sniper rifle that blows holes through anything it touches. I love Magic Bullet because it's such a funny gimmick weapon. It's extremely easy to get and it's extremely powerful, but the trade-off is that you can blow chunks off your employees just as quick as your enemies. Even the suit is a fly as fuck trench coat. Laetitia's gun does look cooler in my opinion, but the way Fry Shoots works is something I haven't seen anywhere else. The whole gimmick with Fry shoots himself is that the 9th shot of his rifle is random, and it will aim anywhere in the facility instead of his target. It originates from an old German fairy tale called Fry Shoot, or Marksman for my dirty English speakers such as myself. Between Red Shoes being a girl that cuts her own legs off to a marksman who kills random people because he shoots too much, German fairy tales are, they're messed up, man. Even Irish folktales just boil down to big burly men getting isekai'd before dying of old age all at once. More guns! Hornet is a rifle from Queen Bee that looks more like a shotgun. Yeah, I'm covering a lot of guns now, but let me have this. The rest of the series has almost no special firearms. Runa didn't give Angela a gun in her Queen Bee form, instead they opted to give her a spear or lance of sorts, and that is tragic. Imagine if she rolled up on Malkuth's floor packing slug rounds, just ripped your nuggets to chunks. Aesthetics wise, this gun slaps. The teeth coming off the top of the barrel looks horrific in the best ways possible, and it keeps a light body horror element that should be present in nearly all the Ego. These weapons are, by all means, extensions of the creatures who give them to you, so the more grotesque a creature is originally, the more fucked up a weapon should look. For example, a lot on the mesas, like Mountain of Smiling Bodies and Meat Lantern, are literally just alive balls on the ends of sticks, which is gnarly and perfect. Queen Bee is one of the more forgettable abnos to me, but this is a damn awesome piece. Also, one of the only guns that does red damage, so you can be sure it's painting the facility walls a cherry hue. Cherry red. Red like the weapon we all knew was unavoidable. There is no denying that this blade has become the de facto poster weapon of the franchise as a whole. The red greatsword embroidered with eyeballs and stray teeth, the mockery of a human in weapon form, it is gorgeous. The flesh latching to the hilt and blade, keeping the whole thing together, while the eyes just bulging out the sides surrounded by sharp fangs. It is perfect alive weapon design, and really makes you feel like you've ripped off Nothing There's arm scythe and kept it for yourself. Well, obviously, Project Moon liked it too, because it became Gabora's main weapon, and she rocks it. It complements her original design immaculately, especially when she was Callie and she rocked the leather trench coat alongside it. Mimicry earns the spot of most iconic Project Moon weapon, because it perfectly encapsulates what City is. City has accrued malignant disease, and in this case, the flesh of Nothing There. Latching onto what is normally clean and sharp, in this case the human inhabitants of City, and making them into killing machines, in this case turning the old and formal respectable greatsword into a disgusting result of corporate greed and disrespect for human life. I am definitely looking way too much into it, and I know for a fact Project Moon did not think this hard about it, but seeing it from the angle of a metaphor for a fixer definitely ups my appreciation for the weapon a ton. You can see this in Callie, who was a girl who just wanted to live a normal life, but due to the indifferent cruelty of City, she was forced into becoming a cold-blooded killer, which led her to being the strongest colour to ever haunt City. She started clean, but got infected by the city, contorting her into a scar-cladded monster. Good job, Mimicry. I may get sick of the bajillion and one Nothing There aberrations, but that's just because the original was worth copying so much. Also, taking from my iceberg video, Nothing There's final form, and particularly his arm scythe, are directly inspired by James Heller, the main character of the game Prototype 2. Don't say I never teach you nothing. But anyways, that was a bit too much introspection for me. Sharkhead, go! Dreaming Current's weapon is just like Nameless's, in the sense that it's literally just a severed body part of the Abno on your employee's hand. Kind of like Woodsman, there's not much to mention here other than I wanted to bring the Abno up. Why wasn't he in Canto 5 Project Moon? Where was he? Crimson Scare and Cobalt Scare are two weapons I gotta do together. Firstly, Cobalt is a wolf's claw, severed off and caked in the blood of its victims. But the Hunter, Red Riding Hood, gives you Crimson Scare, which is her pistol and sickle so that you may hunt monsters in her name. Cobalt's design is whatever to me, I personally don't find it all that cool, but the name is criminally badass. Cobalt Scar. It sounds like the name of a beat-em-up indie game or something. Oh, it goes so hard. Crimson though is just an awesome set of weapons on its own. I'm gonna miss you guns. Blue Star is not only my favourite abnormality, but has one of the most unique weapons in the game, being these little blue star spheres. They follow the wielder like a little destiny ghost. It shoots little projectiles out of the black heart and genuinely just act like neat little drones. I think these orbs have so much room for growth in future games, and I always thought they could do a bit more. But hear me out, imagine if they could shoot lasers. Imagine, and you're gonna have to really imagine hard here, that Project Moon leaves Limbus be for a bit. But let's imagine they actually made their 3D RPG game. Given that it would give you various options to tackle battles, you could use these blue star orbs to shoot lasers and create dynamic traps like trip mines or ricochet off walls to aid with sneaking around or holding down position. I just feel like in a place outside of LobCorp, these little gadgets have a ton of room for experimentation, and I'd love to see more done with them in the future. Good, all censored. We still don't know what it does, but we do know it has tentacles or tendrils. When I mentioned earlier that grotesque monsters should should have weapons that play into their own body horror, I was softly foreshadowing Censored being a literal chunk of the bastard. It's amazing. We may never know what you look like, Censored, and that's great. Keep on inducing PTSD to my employees, baby girl. A-lifts all have these cool gimmicks and designs, but what if they didn't? What if your weapon was literally just a jar of acidic STD jelly? Enter Melting Love. Actually, knowing this fanbase, I should have worded that differently. Introducing Melting Love. It's just a jug of her. That's the whole gimmick. It's literally just her slime in a mug. Nice that it represents the abnormality that it stems from, but pink isn't a very scary colour to me, so sadly there's no horror bonus points I can give this thing, even if it does melt your skin off and turn you into ash in a second. Unlike the last LobCorp weapon I want to talk about. Army in Black with a weapon literally called Pink. You won't be scared of this, but the filthy ordeal certainly will be when you roll up with a 50 caliber sniper rifle. Now this is an A-lift level weapon. Screw your swords, your stinking hammer and your scythe. Give me a good old gun created to turn cement blocks into a fine powder. This design is so cute. I would love the different pink accents with the black barrel, and it even has a silencer so you don't deafen every agent in a 3-room radius. Thank you, AIB. This is definitely one hell of a way to send off my favourite LobCorp weapons. And yes, I did skim over a ton, but that's because some of them I don't care about or really aren't worth talking about. But I do want to give an honourable mention to Naked Mist. Unfortunately though, I can't put a picture of it on screen because YouTube will think it's too phallic, so go look at it yourself if you want. But we're not done with abnormalities just yet because we still have to talk about Wonderlab. I don't really have much to say for Wonderlab because the series doesn't focus much, if at all, on weapons. Ty's sword is the female gender symbol, which is certainly different. Blue Smocked Shepherd's ego is a big-ass katana, a far cry from Red Hood's sickle. And of course, I gotta mention the harbinger of dead memes itself, Cat's comically large spoon, which surprisingly kicks ass and does a shit ton of damage to Abnos. But yeah, that's about all I can say for Wonderlab because the series focuses a ton more on the Abnos and characters than what weapons they use. And that's okay, but stuff like Cat Spoon are creative, so I wish Mimi had done more like it, but it is what it is. But now, we're finally free of facilities and white-collar jobs. It's fixer time, baby. So let me just start by getting some officers whose weapons I don't care about out of the way and making some enemies in this community. But what else is new? There is something I really don't like about the 7th Association, Zhang Office, Shi, Liu, and Kurakuma, Night Owls, Blade Lineage, the Index, the Hana Association, and Dong Huan himself. Now, that's a lot of people, and any astute viewer will have already noticed the pattern. I like the characters themselves, mostly, but it's their weapons I hate. Because nearly every single one of these chucklefucks use one-handed swords, and one-handed swords are boring! With a few exceptions, of course, and some of the people in the groups use cool stuff, and we'll get to most of them, but I'm generalising. Half of the time, swords are just really lame to me. They're so uninspired as far as weapons go, and they just meld together visually. Some of the rest of you may notice that I left out the Y Association, and, well, that's because Zweihanders are certified badass, and I found more impressive than some dinky-ass butter knife. And if you want to fight me on that... Now, to be fair, Hanafuda and the Zhang Office do have cool purple entrails to their swords, which is different. Especially when you have backstreet nobodies like the Axe Gang putting these dunces to shame. Look at these axes. Now that's a weapon. They're clunky yet sleek blades, which could surely cut down any opposition in their path. If they weren't a backstreet syndicate. But hey, rank doesn't account for style. All the higher-ups dress like they're gonna give you health insurance or something. Which brings me into Mirai Life Insurance. The insurers use briefcases as their main weapons, and they want to stay classy, you know. The cases, though, open up at the top to reveal massive metal claws that grab and rip through opponents, leaving them in a fine red mist. Shut the fuck up. Of all the people I'd expect to have something like this, I'd probably wager something like the Workshops or any other inventor. But nah, the life insurance peeps got the mimics for briefcases. Warp is another business that came strapped for the occasion, wielding a variety of techno sci-fi blades. From swords to axes to spears, these janitors own the word style. And the little space entrails that warp weapons leave behind after they attack not only look sick and really emphasize the power behind each attack, but they also just fit the concept of warp trains. Warp trains. Tameri is technically a weapon because they were made by Elena and Jaehun. But Temeri themselves doesn't really need a weapon because that arm does all the work for him. Also, when you bring him down to low enough health and Tommy's head explodes, their back does too, exposing these nasty tendrils which flail wildly trying to kill whatever stands in its way. Now, Elena and Jae-hun. While it isn't exactly a weapon they use, their abilities are still cool and they use them to fight, so I'm gonna talk about them anyways. Elena, also known as the Blood Red Knight, is a blood fiend, much like another abnormality that you fight in this game called Nosferatu. And she specialises in manipulating the blood of her enemies like string. She uses her razor sharp claws to rip into her foes, and then once under her control, she can make them do whatever she pleases. And though this may sound cute, it also means the end for people as strong as Colours. The Vermilion Cross is just one of her many victims, and really puts into perspective how strong she is on her own. Jae-hun, on the other hand, the puppeteer, is a great alternative to Elena because he can also manipulate people into doing his bidding, but in a much more flesh-driven way. Instead of using the blood itself, he uses the flesh and meat of his subjects to play with them, like the puppets, who are just the bones of the first-class passengers of the warp train. Now, I say just the bones, but it is very much the people themselves, and they are still alive somehow because you can hear them gargling. And the puppets themselves use axes and clubs made of, assumedly, their own bones, which is perfectly dark. Oh, it's so good. You could very well make the argument that these aren't weapons per se, but I wanted to include them because manipulating someone by their blood vessels is one of the most awesomely over-the-top stupid abilities I've ever seen in fiction. Now, since I'm allowing abilities in this video, I would love to talk about my main man Pluto, but I will be dead honest with you. To this day, I still do not understand how his Heaven Sword looking ass works. But the contracts are pretty powerful given how he can just teleport someone's heart. That someone being Bada, a worker of the Kane office heralded by the goat Nemo. Now Nemo doesn't need weapons, he is the weapon. Using his noggin, Nemo can smash, blast and eviscerate anyone who wants to harm his profits. All by using his microwave light beam concentrated entirely from his metal temple. I wonder how much this costs to actually use because, well, electricity isn't cheap. Where does he even store all the energy anyways? Because, well, he's got a slim enough frame and his head is literally just an iPad on a hinge. There's not much room for a generator. Also, how does his brain not fry to ash when he uses the beam? But, alright, look, let's not think about it too hard and just move on, capiche? I mentioned the Hana Association earlier and how I didn't really like their swords. Well, Mirane uses a staff, but that's still kind of uninteresting. Harold, however, is much more appealing because she's got nanomachines, son. And yes, Harold is a she, in case you didn't know, and I wouldn't blame you for forgetting her in the first place. Well, the other members all have nanomachines on their weapons, like in Mirane's block animation, but Harold uses them directly on her body to create a massive fist, just straight up deck people with. This is the only time we've ever seen any sort of nanotechnology in the franchise, and it makes sense that something so powerful is safe at the top. Though I would also expect the higher up Orcorp squads to have something like it too. Who knows, maybe the Orcorp division we know today may in fact get it someday themselves. Orcorp is the private military service of City, and we get to meet them in Lobotomy Corporation, Wonderlab and Ruina. Well, at least a certain division of them. We do get to see the rabbits, rhinos and reindeer though, as well as their commander Nikolai, who uses a stylish orange and black techno sword. But that doesn't matter because guns are back! The rabbits come packing with assault rifles and combat knives. These guys are the foot soldiers and they mean business. Ammo is a scarcity in City, but when you're the private military in such a kill or be killed world, you'll get funding out the ass. So ammo is not an issue to these guys, and unlike a certain group I'll get into in a second, they actually use their guns like guns and mostly only use their knife to finish targets off. The reindeer just use staffs with bad juju to obliterate your pancakes. Now, it is cool that it takes a mental toll on the user and they are directly linked to the staff itself. It gives reindeers a very nice downside despite being arguably the strongest of the three groups. But if you ask me, the best of them is the rhinos. Big guys and even bigger hammers. Donned in massive mech suits, and I mean massive. These guys lug around hammers that are bigger than they are and use them to absolutely obliterate anything in their path. And this reminds me of why rabbits were picked for LobCorp in universe. Because, well, the reindeers would cause too much mental damage to the manager, and the motherfucking rhinos would just destroy the facility in the fight. Suffering from success, Maxim, my boy. Together, these three animals do make a cool combo, and Orcorp gear in general is really stylish. Orange and black is just a combo made in heaven. That group I mentioned, by the way, is the Thumb, one of the five fingers and the stand-in for the mafia of the city. These red-wearing enforcers stick with tradition and use old-timey rifles to lay down the law. Except when I say they use old-timey guns, I mean that on either the most literal or unliteral sense possible. Depends on what you consider as using a gun. Because the Thug rarely shoot their rifles, and as we mentioned before, bullets are expensive. And despite being one of the 5 biggest syndicates, they're not getting the corporation funding needed like the Rabbits, so the guns are more for show. That, and using them as clubs to cave in the skulls of opposers. Boris, the main enforcer and resident cool guy, uses the best weapons of all. His fists. And Kalo, the big boss, he even has a metal arm, uses a staff, but he also has this really awesome looking flintlock, which plays into the whole professionalism of the thumb perfectly. Hook Office is a small-time syndicate turned office who act as the resident techwear thugs. These smooth criminals don't even use hooks. Well, the nameless thugs do, but the actual 3 main fixers just use slightly hook-shaped weapons. The most notable of all would be Tain, who has 2 massive sights that protrude off his back and kind of work like Doc Ock's arms. That is the second time I've made that comparison, and rest assured, it won't be the last. I really like the way these look. I assume the brown part is metal, but it kind of looks like wood, which adds a bit of a homemade touch to them. It fits too, because the Hook Gang are a syndicate turned fixer office, so it would make sense that they kept their rustic sidearms. This actually reminds me of why I wanted to make this video originally, and that's because of the workshop affiliated fixers office page, where they mention that most of the weapons in City need to be vetted first and confirmed to be suitable for City. How the actual fuck are these suitable for City? In what world does this pass whatever test it is? Tain walks into the office and goes, "Yo, tax my shit." And the inspectors look at this and say, "Yeah, that looks city worthy to me, homie," and boom bada bing, it's done, I guess. Stuff like the rusted chain links makes sense to exist because syndicates don't follow City rules. But Hook is an office now, how did this shit fly? Well anyways, the rusted chain links are a syndicate in the back streets and one of my utmost favourite guests in Ruina. They brandish rusty spike chains that wrap around their own arms and use them as whips to enemies and themselves because they are a masochistic group who revel in pain. Jakan is their leader and his arms are swallowed in the chains. The design is so stupidly simple when you think about it, but it perfectly encapsulates what it means to be a psychopathic outlaw. It's so perfect for City, just literally cobbling trash together to kill people with. They are an extremely edgy bunch, and maybe I'm too edgy for loving them so much, but they deserve my attention because it's just how silly they are in concept, yet how cool they are in practice. The whips are very, very basic in design, just being iron chains with spikes on them. A simple sickening weapon for a simply sickening gang of psychos. I have this many hours on Runa, and to this day I still do not have a single clue what any of Rola's weapons are called, except for Durandal. I think Angelica's gloves are a really awesome concept in theory, being able to instantly pull out whatever's needed at a moment's notice, but in practice, it's a little silly. This is the first time we see a shotgun in Runa, and by the gameplay we can tell that Roland does have infinite ammo, so why doesn't he just use that in the double Glocks all the time? Like, the only enemy we fought who was immune to bullets was Argalia, and even then, Durandal is lame in comparison to that greatsword. It's fucking wicked looking. The gears and pipes give it a very weird mix of a refined and homemade scrappy look, despite the fact that it was made for the best, by the best. Tell you what though, that would have done a whole lot more damage to Angela. Argalia, everyone's favourite pretty boy, uses a scythe. I don't need a law degree to convince you that scythes are sick, especially his one embroidered with blue and gold to match his coat. Now that I think about it, there isn't really that many scythes in this series. There's the capo, and this, and I think that's it. I might be wrong though. It wouldn't be a me video without me telling you to go read Distortion Detective. Moses has a pipe that she can use to fight enemies. So the more she smokes, the better she is at clearing distortions, but it comes at a horrific toll on her body. A very good high-risk, high-reward weapon. But that's all I'm going to say because the rest is spoiler territory and I know your ass hasn't read it. Go read Distortion Detective. Ezra is in it, and she literally punches holes through men. Also, it can be used as a weapon, so I'll count her dimensional bag, which allows her to hold all sorts of various weapons and doohickeys that she uses throughout the series. You know, while I was talking about Distortion Detective there, I was genuinely trying to remember anyone's name from Leviathan, and I literally cannot. I know the end of the first chapter like the back of my hand because of the awesome Solace art, but I don't remember anyone, let alone their weapon. Virgil's sword does look and sound cool in theory, but it's just so short. It's just short enough to the point where it looks weird, but not long enough to look cool. I don't know what's up with it. But you're not allowed to use this as fuel to rag on him either, because he's not a fraud, and he's my goat because he abuses all the sinners except for Faust. He's awesome! Getting dangerously close to gacha territory there. Let's reel it back to Ruina for now. Gaze Office are a group of robotically enhanced humans who are trying to track down Molar Office by following their journey on a warp train. Bono is of course the most interesting one, and I promise to God this is the last time I'll make a Doc Ock comparison. But I mean, come on, look at him. Bono is the most like Dr. Octopus though, because he specifically fights with the arms and uses them a lot to grab people, which Must be hard with those tiny grippers. Technology like this must be super expensive, but it's still so cool that any old Joe can save up enough cash to just get 4 more arms in City. Like, these guys were way out of left field when they were just introduced, and it's almost like a really cruel parody of the Brotherhood of Iron. You're cool, Bono, except I'm still bothered about you having an extra finger on your bottom right hand. We will never ever know the meaning of that. Also, speaking of Brotherhood of Iron, I have another little observation that I made. Look at this. In Moe's dialogue art, he has a really awesome pipe rifle scrapped together, and I presume this was meant to be his main weapon, because in fights, he doesn't have that. Presumably this is in early development, and if that's the case, then these guys were probably planned for Urban Plague with a full stop office. Sadly, in game, he doesn't have the gun, but instead he has... Someone at Project Moon has a fetish for chainsaws. Aerie has a chainsaw greatsword, which looks really rusty and scrappy. Fits her low rank well, while still looking intimidating and scary. Give Aerie a bit more love. And the Brotherhood of Iron all have chainsaws, and they all look wicked. Especially Arnold's, who was just an arm blade that attaches directly to him, and Constance, which is also just another long sword chainsaw. Moe's, as previously mentioned, is the most normal quote-unquote, with just a regular hand blade. Almost the entirety of Rose Banner use chainsaw weapons, from chainsaw swords to chainsaw axes to even huge chainsaw spanners. Not to mention, if you're willing enough, you can have a fuck-off chainsaw arm. And we will get to Gregor War in a moment, but for now, I just love how ratchet and homemade this looks. Like, they just weren't expecting one of their workers to lose an arm, so they just went, boom, chainsaw implants, and it works. Motor Office all have chainsaws. Rain uses a chainsaw greatsword too, but I don't care because Ares is longer, cooler, and she's cuter. Rain's doesn't look like it could cut much because it looks blunt as hell, but you do you, man. Wherever there's a chain, there's a saw. Mika has a tiny chainsaw sword, a chainsword, and there's a reason you've forgotten this weapon, because it sucks. And Olga has a chainsaw axe, a small one that she can throw in the game she shouldn't have been in. And even though it's tiny, and I've said repeatedly that I like big weapons, I think the fact that it can be tossed and returned like a boomerang does add a lot to it. And I realise that that may not sound like a lot on paper, but for that many weapons to fit such a certain niche in a 3-game series, someone is definitely putting strings in the background to get them in. All that being said though, we still haven't had a literal actual chainsaw as a weapon yet, and I think we'll either have to wait another few years for the next shot at anything creative like that, or 2 weeks because Limbus' power scaling is a fucking comedy. Gregor does have the coolest chainsaw, credit where credit is due, and that's because he has the best looking IDs and ego out of all 11 sinners. Whoever decided that we should swap his arm out with other weapons like chainsaws and a fucking tree branch deserves a raise and a sloppy for 20 bucks. Gregor's aids is the coolest thing in the game, and the fact that the centipede breaks into little segments magnetically is just so cool. Heathcliff's is also pretty cool with the electric bat, but the creativity on display for Gregor's animations and designs just deserves praise. Especially the pirate Yar, it be me One Piece. On that same note, whoever decided that Gregor's arm should be replaced with a prosthetic arm and given normal weapons should be publicly executed because this is creatively bankrupt and boring. I want to give a pass to Sous Chef because I adore Jack and Pierre so much, being some of my favourite characters in the franchise. Oh man, this script was written in December before all that. Fuck. But Pierre and Jack use basic kitchen utensils. It fits them, but it's bland, and they could have done something with Gregor to spice it up. Like had a greatsword or something on his arm, but nah, they gave him the admittedly cool homemade wooden arm, but it's still an arm and it's just lame. Liu and Zwei Gregor both shouldn't exist either. Don't give my man a normal arm, he needs more sap. Heathcliff has a metal bat, and I don't know if you've noticed this, but this bat is goddamn Mahusu. Now that's girth. It's bigger than half the cast, but I do have a small little observation. Have you ever noticed that basically none of the Sinners IDs actually use their main weapon from their LCB style? The one that has their, whole motto engraved onto it. Just saying. What we have now is great, but some more IDs that are actually reflective of the Sinners would also be nice. The only person who has actually all but one of their IDs using their base weapon is Ryoshu, but that's because she uses a sword, and I mean it's boring to begin with. But then she uses a shotgun in her LCTB ID, and you love to see it. More guns, yes! Look, it wouldn't be me if I didn't fit a Limbus criticism in somewhere, but one creative and really cool example of what they have done with this is Ishmael. Her base ID uses a shield and a mace, and then she has a riot shield and a pistol in her LCCB form, and that's a wicked twist. Riot shields are badass when paired with pistols, and this ID art is just so spectacular, it's incredible. It's a very, very, very good city style twist on something relatively normal, while still keeping the shield and sidearm of her base ID, and twisting it into something more akin to the actual story with LCCB. I do wish she had more shields, and I think something like a Monster Hunter gun lance would be really cool to see one day, but she should have gotten a K-Corp ID and she didn't, so let's let's be real here. In Canto 5, Ricardo and his goons have chains on their arms, and though they don't exactly have spikes on them, I still want to mention them. They have no need for weapons though, they have their fists and a ton of tats. K-Corp are policemen. They use batons, shields and other various tech. They look pretty sly. The green and black combined really pops and adds a ton of flair to them. LCCB on that same token also have cool uniforms. And I've already mentioned Ishmael, but Ryosu's shotgun, just going back to it, is a real standout. It's just, there isn't really that many shotguns in this series compared to the other guns, and it's great to see one. And Rhino Mirasol was packing with not a hammer, okay, well, he has arm blades on his stubby little hands. Slash you with them. This is too adorable to take seriously. Like, how would you find this scary? Dawn usually uses a lance to plow through her foes, and in her Sync ID, she uses a rapier, a fencing sword. And funnily enough, I may have quite an affinity to those compared to some other blades, so I like this idea a lot. Sync fits Dawn like a glove, and it genuinely feels like a perfect ID for her. It does change her base weapon, but rapiers are pokey, like a lance, and they're usually seen as honourable blades for respectable heroes throughout all of fiction, like the Three Musketeers or Zorro, and that fits her too. Getting to the end of my list here, Mars has a great sword, pretty snazzy. Very shiny though, like oddly shiny. Either he cleans it religiously or it just looks like that. The Indigo Elder has a badass harpoon gun. Yeah! I love this guy. Top one color. He's the GOAT! The GOAT! The Sweepers are an odd case because their weapons are baked into them. They are the weapon, which makes them a bit more horrifying. I did the Liu a bit dirty earlier, so I'll clear some air. I just think the Liu using swords is a little bit underwhelming. While the idea of a sword going up in flames is cool, they don't do that in their designs. The swords are just regular blades. I quite love the martial arts side because the idea of someone kicking so hard their legs go up in flames is awesome. And the glaive that Xiao uses in her ego is clean as hell. But look, all I'm saying is that if we need to kill people's fiancés or crushes to get cooler and more unique weapons, then maybe we should start thinking about a new lover killer office. Also, give the Liu flamethrowers, you cowards, then they'd be a real threat. Oh hey, look over there, that green-haired girl. Maybe she can be our first customer. Yuna of the Dawn office uses a guitar case as her main weapon. There is no guitar though, sadly, but instead the case opens up to reveal massive blades that suddenly pop out and slice anything in front of it to rip. Hey, this sounds and looks awfully familiar, but that's just a theory. Yuna's case is very bizarre, but in a good way. I want to find whoever it is that turns these normal objects into homemade deli slicers and just get them to keep making them because they're so silly. I also want to mention how Yuna's slash animation is her picking it up and the three blades form a claw at the edge. I just thought that was really neat. Salvador's longsword gets imbued with fire, and it's something the Liu don't do, but it is badass. And so does my favourite character in the franchise, though a sword doesn't really suit you. Hey, I know, I got an office now. Don't worry, I can take care of this. Okay, I'm back. That Yuna girl didn't put up much of a fight. You should feel the results in about 10 to 20 seconds. Oh, there we go. Another happy customer with a much cooler sidearm. And what an arm that is, made of pure stone and fire. Old Sephiroth here is seriously imposing. I remember him being the first fight that ever rinsed me on my first playthrough, and even all these years later, his design still reminds me of the upward struggle I had to beat him. But his sword is why I'm here. A pure slab of rock and magma. This thing is sure to leave any of your nuggets well done after one or two swipes. Everything about his design complements each other so well, and I just can't stress how cool this blade looks. Especially when he puts it under his wing and it's just like, oh, it's so badass! His next fight isn't really anything to write home about since he doesn't particularly use weapons, and as much as I'd love to gush about it as a concept, I will again make a video on that some other day. He does use Yuna and Salvador in his attacks, which is depressingly well designed, and Salvador even keeps his little mustache, how cute. Then in the reverb, he gets a big ass staff. Oh, what a downgrade, man. Even when he gets the flames on it, it's such a letdown. It's a shame because they really did fumble him at the finish line. Except not, because his distortion form does not belong in this series. This is a metal as shit angel design. It looks like the final boss to a JRPG. I don't even know what that sun in his hand is meant to be, but it just looks so perfect. I wouldn't have it any other way. Except if he had his great sword back, but what could have been? The orb can turn into a staff, so we know it could have turned into a sword if they wanted it to. But still, fire design for a fire character. And I think that's about everyone I wanted to mention. Thank you immensely for watching. This video is far too long for something I wanted to do just to use one Bocce the Rock clip. And also, leave a like if you enjoyed the video. And if I insulted your favourite character, please let me know in the comments below. Extremely sorry for the long gap between uploads, but this is just kind of the norm now. There's no fixing it.